Most people view a garden trellis as mere decoration. In reality, what you are looking at is one of the most effective food production systems you can possibly build in a backyard. Pound for pound, vertical crops outperform ground crops in every single category. You achieve higher yields per square foot, improved air circulation, and much easier harvests. Additionally, your fruit remains in the sun rather than rotting on the soil. Today, we are exploring 15 crops that flourish when they grow vertically. Some you will recognize, but at least half of these will likely surprise you. We are discussing plants that people rarely consider as climbers, but can produce immensely if you simply provide them with a structure to grow on. Let's get into it. Top 1. Chayote. We are starting with one that most people have never cultivated. Once you hear the statistics, you are going to wonder why. Chayote, also known as vegetable pear or mirliton, resembles a pale green, slightly wrinkled pear. It is part of the gourd family, related to squash and cucumber, and it is a total monster on a trellis. It thrives in growing zones 7 through 11, though gardeners in zone 6 have found success by using a thick layer of mulch over winter to protect the roots. Here is the number that shocks people. A single chayote plant can produce between 50 and 100 fruits in one season. For a family of 4, one well-placed vine is genuinely sufficient. It requires about 10 square feet of ground space, but will happily climb 8 to 12 feet vertically. Essentially, you are getting a 100-fruit harvest from the footprint of a small coffee table. Nutritionally, chayote is rich in folate, vitamin C, zinc, and manganese. It is low-calorie, high-fiber, and has been used in traditional Mexican and Central American medicine for blood pressure support. Planting tip: you don't plant a seed, you plant the whole fruit. Push it into the soil fat end down, angled so the narrow stem end is just barely above the soil surface. Then step back because this vine moves fast. Set your trellis in place before you plant. You won't have time to figure it out later. Did you know the entire chayote plant is edible? The young shoots, called chayote greens, are eaten as a vegetable across Latin America and parts of Asia. The roots can also be eaten when the plant is mature. You're not just growing fruit, you're growing an entire edible plant. Top 2. Pole beans. Pole beans are among the most well-known trellis crops, and they deserve every bit of that reputation. They grow in zones 3 through 10, which is basically everywhere. They go in the ground once soil temperatures hit 60 degrees. They climb on their own by spiraling their vines around whatever you provide, and they start producing in about 60 days. A 10-foot row of pole beans will yield roughly 8 to 12 pounds of beans over the season, compared to bush beans, which burn bright for about 10 days and then finish. Pole beans keep producing from the bottom of the vine to the top, giving you a rolling harvest for weeks. Planting tip: seed packets will tell you to space pole beans 4 to 6 inches apart, but you can cut that in half. I have planted them at 2 to 3 inches apart along a trellis with no issues. Vertical growth means they are not competing for ground space, they are competing for vertical space, and there is plenty of that. Dense planting along a trellis actually creates a windbreak effect that the plants seem to like. Pro tip: when it comes to beans, the more consistently you harvest, the more they will keep producing. As long as you keep picking the pods while they are young, the plant continues pushing out new flowers and beans, almost like it is responding to demand. However, if you let the pods mature and harvest everything at once, the plant slows down and starts shutting down production. In my experience, frequent picking can easily double or even triple your total harvest over the season. Top 3. Malabar spinach. Regular spinach hates heat. The minute temperatures push past 75 degrees, it bolts, goes bitter, and it is done. Malabar spinach doesn't care. It thrives in heat, climbs a trellis effortlessly, and just keeps producing all summer long. This isn't true spinach, it is Bacella alba, a tropical vine native to India and Southeast Asia. But the leaves have a similar flavor and cook down the same way. It grows in zones 7 through 11 in the ground, but it can be started indoors and transplanted in cooler zones as an annual. It climbs 10 to 20 feet on a strong trellis. Because it is a cut and come again crop, you can harvest leaves continuously from the same plant throughout the season. From a 2-foot section of trellis, one Malabar spinach plant can yield several pounds of greens over a summer, all from a plant that regular spinach can't even survive in. Nutritionally, it punches hard with calcium, iron, and vitamins A and C. It contains a compound called Bacilla saponins that has shown anti-inflammatory properties in research. Some studies have looked at its potential for blood sugar management. Did you know Malabar spinach is sometimes called climbing spinach or vine spinach, and it has been cultivated in Asia for over 2,000 years? The berries. Yes, it produces small dark purple berries, were historically used as a natural food dye. The red stem variety is genuinely beautiful growing on a trellis. Top 4. Cucumbers. Cucumbers are natural-born climbers and one of the most rewarding trellis crops you can grow. They thrive in zones 4 through 11. They go in the ground after the last frost when the soil is warm, and they hit harvest in about 50 to 70 days. One vining cucumber plant on a trellis will typically produce 15 to 25 cucumbers over the season. The key word there is vining. Make sure you are planting a vining variety, not a bush type, or you are not going to get the vertical growth you want. The benefit of growing cucumbers vertically goes beyond space. Cucumbers on a trellis produce straighter fruit because it hangs free instead of curling on the ground. The airflow dramatically reduces powdery mildew, which is the #1 killer of cucumber plants, and you spot problems earlier because you can see the whole plant. Nutritionally, cucumbers are mostly water, which makes them excellent for hydration, along with vitamin K, potassium, and silica, which supports joint and skin health. Planting tip. Cucumbers are recommended at 12 inches apart. In practice, you can go down to 6 inches on a trellis without any real issue. The vines want to go up, not out. I have grown them at 6-inch spacing for years, and they do just fine as long as the trellis has good mesh for the tendrils to grab. Top 5. Tomatillos. Most people who grow tomatillos just let them sprawl. They are bushy, they flop over, the branches break, and fruit falls. It is a mess. What almost nobody does is trellis them, and it completely changes the plant. Tomatillos are not vines, but they are sprawlers with heavy branches that are almost designed to be supported. They grow in zones 5 through 12 as annuals. They grow 4 to 5 feet tall and produce prolifically. One plant typically yields 50 to 100 husk tomatillos in a season from about 4 square feet of ground space. When you put 2 or 3 stakes around a tomatillo plant and run horizontal strings between them as it grows, a tomato cage style or Florida weave, you suddenly have a plant that gets full sun on every branch, drops almost no fruit, and is dramatically easier to harvest. The branches stay where you put them instead of collapsing under their own weight. Did you know tomatillos won't self-pollinate? You need at least 2 plants for fruit to set. If you are only growing one and wondering why you have beautiful flowers and 0 fruit, that is why. Always plant tomatillos in pairs at minimum. Top 6. Spaghetti squash. Spaghetti squash on the ground takes up an enormous amount of real estate, with vines sprawling 8 to 10 feet in every direction. On a trellis, that same plant takes up about 2 feet of ground space and climbs upward instead of outward. Growing in zones 3 through 11, it takes about 80 to 100 days to harvest. One plant typically produces 4 to 5 full squash per season, each averaging 4 to 5 pounds. That is around 20 pounds of food from 2 square feet of ground. The trellis method does require you to support the fruit as it gets heavy. Use old pantyhose, mesh netting, or cloth slings tied to the trellis, but the result is fruit that ripens evenly in the sun and never rots on the underside from ground contact. Planting tip. Don't direct sow spaghetti squash seeds flat. Make a small mound of loose, rich soil about 6 inches high and plant your seeds into the top of that mound. The mound keeps the crown of the plant from sitting in moisture and dramatically reduces root rot. As the vine takes off, guide it toward your trellis and it will start to self-train. Once it finds the structure, it grabs on. Nutritionally, spaghetti squash is high in vitamin C, B vitamins, manganese, and fiber. At around 40 calories per cup, it is one of the most filling low-calorie foods you can grow. Top 7. Bitter melon. Bitter melon is going to be new for most gardeners in North America, and that is a shame because it produces incredibly well on a trellis and has nutritional credentials that are genuinely hard to match. It grows in zones 9 through 12 in the ground, but it grows beautifully in containers or as an annual further north. Treat it the way you would treat a late-start sweet potato or okra. It needs heat and a long, warm season. The vine climbs easily using tendrils, reaches 6 to 15 feet, and produces 10 to 15 fruits per plant, each hanging down clearly for easy picking. Nutritionally, bitter melon is in a category of its own. It contains compounds including charantin and polypeptide P that mimic insulin and have been extensively studied for blood sugar management. It is one of the most researched plants in the world for type 2 diabetes. It is also high in vitamin C, folate, zinc, and iron. In Asian traditional medicine, it has been used for thousands of years. The taste, yes, is bitter. It earns its name. But picked young when it is still bright green, the bitterness is much more manageable. It is excellent in stir-fry, stuffed and cooked, or sliced thin and sautéed with eggs the way it is eaten across Southeast Asia. Did you know bitter melon has been shown in multiple clinical studies to lower fasting blood glucose levels? Researchers in the Philippines, India, and Japan have all published peer-reviewed studies on its effectiveness. It is not folk medicine. There is real pharmacological research behind this plant. Top 8. Peas. Peas are one of the first things anyone plants in spring, and for good reason. They go in the ground while it is still cold, they climb a trellis by themselves with no training needed, and they are one of the most satisfying harvests in the garden. They grow in zones 3 through 11, planted 4 to 6 weeks before the last frost. They do best in cool weather, with soil temps between 45 and 70 degrees, and they are one of the few crops that improve soil nitrogen while they grow. A 6-foot trellis planted solidly with peas will yield roughly 3 to 5 pounds per 10-foot row over the season. Nutritionally, peas are exceptional for a fresh vegetable, providing plant-based protein, fiber, vitamin C and K, folate, manganese, and thiamine. Snap peas especially are one of the most complete snacking vegetables you can grow. Planting tip: most seed packets recommend planting peas 1 to 2 inches apart. You can absolutely push that tighter down to about an inch along a trellis with good support. The dense planting works in your favor. The vines interlock, they support each other, and the productivity per linear foot goes way up. I have done it both ways, and closer planting along a trellis just works. Did you know peas were one of the earliest cultivated crops in human history, with evidence of cultivation going back 10,000 years in the Near East? The first genetic experiments by Gregor Mendel, the ones that formed the foundation of modern genetics, were done with garden peas. This humble trellis plant literally gave us genetics. Top 9. Yardlong beans. If you have never grown yardlong beans, also called asparagus beans or Chinese long beans, this is one of those crops where first-time growers can't quite believe what they are looking at. The pods grow, as the name suggests, up to 36 inches long. They hang in pairs from the vine like long green ribbons. The plant is vigorous, heat-loving, and will race up a 6-foot trellis in weeks. They grow in zones 7 through 11, though in warmer parts of zone 6 with a late start, they will produce well. They need heat with similar timing to cucumbers or sweet corn. One yard-long bean plant will produce prolifically throughout the heat of summer when regular beans slow down. They are specifically adapted to hot, humid conditions and just keep going. Nutritionally, they are similar to regular green beans, containing protein, fiber, vitamins A and C, and folate. But the long pods have a slightly more complex flavor, described as somewhere between a green bean and an asparagus. Planting tip: plant seeds 2 to 3 inches apart along the base of your trellis. Like pole beans, you can go denser than the packet suggests. 4 to 6 inches is the recommendation, but 2 to 3 inches works well in practice. They climb by twisting around supports, so give them string, netting, or wire mesh. Top 10. Indeterminate tomatoes. Every gardener grows tomatoes, but not every gardener realizes that the ones labeled indeterminate are essentially vines that, left unchecked, will grow 10 feet tall or more, and that this is a feature, not a problem. They grow in zones 4 through 11 as annuals and basically everywhere with season extension. The key is variety selection. Always look for the word indeterminate on the label. These are the varieties that just keep growing and producing until frost kills them. Determinate types grow to a set height, set their fruit, and they are done. An indeterminate tomato on a strong vertical string or trellis with suckers pruned to a single main stem will produce more fruit per square foot than any other method because you are maximizing the plant's energy into one productive vine rather than letting it spread in every direction. From a single well-managed indeterminate vine, a serious grower can get 20 to 30 pounds of tomatoes in a season from 1 square foot of ground space. Nutritionally, tomatoes are rich in lycopene, a powerful antioxidant linked to reduced cancer risk, along with vitamin C, potassium, and folate. Lycopene actually becomes more bioavailable when the tomatoes are cooked, which is why tomato sauce is actually nutritionally more potent than fresh tomatoes. Did you know tomatoes were considered poisonous in Europe and North America for a long time? The leaves are toxic, and people assumed the fruit was too. It took until the early 1800s for tomatoes to become widely accepted as food in the United States. Top 11 Luffa. Most people don't know that the Luffa sponge in their shower was grown in someone's garden, and almost nobody knows that if you harvest it young, it is edible and delicious. Luffa, or Luffa aegyptiaca, is a tropical vine in the gourd family that produces long, cylinder-shaped fruit. Picked young at about 4 to 6 inches, it tastes like a mild zucchini and is used extensively in Indian, Vietnamese, and Chinese cooking. Let it mature and dry on the vine, and you have a natural scrubbing sponge. It grows in zones 7 through 11 in the ground. In cooler zones, start it indoors 8 to 10 weeks before transplanting. It is a long-season crop that needs 150 to 200 warm days. The vine is vigorous, climbing easily to 15 feet or more, and one plant produces several dozen fruits per season if harvested regularly. Nutritionally, young Luffa is high in vitamin C, B vitamins, and iron. It is low-calorie and high-fiber. Planting tip: soak Luffa seeds overnight before planting. The seed coat is hard, and soaking dramatically improves the germination rate. Plant in rich, well-drained soil in full sun and get a strong trellis ready before it goes in the ground. Did you know the Luffa has been cultivated for over 6,000 years in Asia and Africa, primarily as a food crop? The use as a bath sponge is a relatively modern Western application. In Egypt and India, it is still primarily considered a vegetable. Most of us have been using food as a shower tool. Top 12 Winter squash, butternut, acorn, delicata, kabocha. All of them can go vertical, and all of them absolutely should if you are tight on space. They grow in zones 3 through 10. These are long-season crops, typically 90 to 110 days to harvest. One winter squash plant on the ground will easily take 30 to 50 square feet of spreading vine. On a robust trellis, cattle panel, arched hog wire, or a strong wooden frame, that same plant takes 2 to 3 square feet on the ground. Yield varies by variety, but one plant typically produces 4 to 8 squash per season. The critical thing when growing winter squash vertically is fruit support. As the squash grows past a softball size, make a sling. Old pantyhose works perfectly, as does a mesh bag or cut-up cloth, and tie it to the trellis so the squash hangs supported rather than pulling on the vine. Nutritionally, winter squash is outstanding, providing beta-carotene, vitamin C, potassium, magnesium, and B6. The deep orange flesh of varieties like butternut indicates high carotenoid content, which is linked to eye health and immune function. Did you know winter squash gets its name not from when it grows? It is a summer-grown crop, but from when it keeps. The thick skin allows it to be stored through winter without refrigeration. Properly cured in a warm, dry spot after harvest, butternut squash can last 6 to 8 months. That is a food storage crop you can grow yourself. Top 13. Vining zucchini. Standard zucchini is a bush plant, and most gardeners know it as a ground dweller that takes over a raised bed. What most people don't know is that certain zucchini varieties are vining types, and on a trellis they change the game entirely. Look for tromboncino, also called trombetta di albenga, an Italian heirloom variety with long curved fruits and a distinctly vining habit. It climbs readily, produces heavily, and the fruit itself is excellent, firm, mild, and far less watery than standard zucchini, which means it holds up better in cooking. It grows in zones 3 through 10 as an annual. Tromboncino is more heat tolerant and more disease resistant than most standard zucchini, which means it keeps producing through the part of summer when powdery mildew is taking down your regular squash plants. One vining zucchini plant on a trellis produces continuously from midsummer through the first frost, typically 20 to 30 fruits per plant over the season from about 2 square feet of ground space. Pro tip from my wife and me: zucchini plants produce both male and female flowers. If the female flowers aren't properly pollinated, they won't develop into full fruit. Each morning when the blooms open, I take a Q-tip, dab it inside a male flower to collect the pollen, then gently brush that pollen onto the center of the female flowers, the ones with a tiny baby zucchini at the base. I use the same Q-tip for several flowers, and the whole process takes about 5 minutes. Since we started hand pollinating, our fruit set has increased by at least 60%. We do this not just for zucchinis, but also for cucumbers, melons, and squash. Top 14. Melons. Growing melons vertically is one of those things that sounds complicated until you do it once and realize it is actually more manageable than letting them run across the ground. They grow in zones 4 through 11. Melons are warm season, long season crops, typically 70 to 90 days. The key to trellising them is variety selection. Small to medium fruiting varieties work best. Cantaloupe, honeydew, and most muskmelons do well. Full-size watermelons are possible, but require a very strong structure and solid fruit slings. Most people are better off growing smaller personal watermelon varieties vertically. One melon plant on a trellis produces 3 to 5 fruits per season from around 2 to 3 square feet of ground space. The fruit sling is non-negotiable once melons reach a pound or two in size. Pantyhose, mesh bags, or strips of old t-shirt material knotted to the trellis work great. The sling cradles the fruit while it finishes ripening and prevents the stem connection from snapping. Nutritionally, melons are high in vitamins A and C, potassium, and water content. Cantaloupe specifically is one of the most nutrient-dense fruits you can grow. The orange flesh indicates high beta-carotene. Did you know you can tell a cantaloupe is ripe without cutting it? By smell alone. A ripe cantaloupe will emit a distinct, sweet, musky fragrance from the blossom end, not the stem end. If it smells like candy from a foot away, it's ready. Top 15. Hyacinth bean. We are ending with one that most North American gardeners have never heard of, and it might be the most visually stunning crop you can grow on a trellis. Hyacinth bean, or Lablab purpureus, produces deep purple stems, bright green leaves with purple undersides, vivid purple flowers, and shiny dark purple pods that hang in clusters. It is genuinely one of the most beautiful plants in the edible garden, and it produces like crazy. It grows in zones 9 through 11 as a perennial and is grown everywhere else as an annual. It needs heat and full sun. The vines grow 10 to 15 feet and will absolutely cover an arch or trellis frame by midsummer. Here is the important note: the mature beans must be cooked. Raw dried hyacinth beans contain cyanogenic glycosides and are toxic until cooked. Young green pods can be eaten cooked like green beans. The mature seeds, boiled until tender with the water changed once or twice, are safe, nutritious, and delicious. They have been used across India and Africa as a protein source for centuries. Nutritionally, cooked hyacinth beans are high in plant protein, iron, folate, and potassium. They are one of the most protein-dense beans you can grow. That is 15 crops that will genuinely transform what your vertical space can produce. Whether you have a small raised bed, a fence line, or a single cattle panel leaning against a wall, every one of these crops will reward you with more food per square foot than anything you are leaving on the ground. If this guide to vertical abundance has changed the way you look at your garden space, please subscribe and like the video. We are dedicated to uncovering the historical and practical secrets of self-sufficiency that have been overlooked for too long. Let's cultivate a more productive future together. The next treasure trove of gardening wisdom will be opened very soon.